Alright YouTube, so we are back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and in our last video, briefly near the beginning of the video, I talked about kind of the sales of the game and how I feel like it's, to some degree, underperformed, and it actually turns out that there was a financial results briefing for quarter 1 of fiscal year 2021 just a couple of days ago. So for a quick refresh, and for maybe those people that don't know, when it comes to Square Enix, their fiscal year starts on April 1st and ends on March 31st the next year, and it's always a year ahead. So even though we're in 2020 right now, they're in fiscal year 2021. So what we're looking at here is the money they made from April 1st, which is just before Final Fantasy VII Remake launched, and up to June 30th. And I think part of why this kind of went under the radar is there's not really a whole lot to talk about from this. There are some interesting things we're going to look at, but also at the end of the financial results briefing, there was not a Q&A with Yasuke Matsuda. Every time I've ever done a financial results briefing for Square Enix, there's always a Q&A with Matsuda, who's the CEO and president of Square Enix, and for some reason there wasn't one with this, and I don't really know why. And oftentimes with the Q&A they do at the end with him, we've gotten some decent bits of info for Remake, and so it kind of sucks that wasn't a part of this. Maybe it's a COVID thing, I don't know. Now, as is to be expected, a lot of this stuff is numbers and graphs and a lot of technical shit that we as the consumers don't really need to know or care about, but there is some stuff that we want to talk about, of course. So with this first graph we're going to look at here is pretty interesting. They do a comparison of the final quarter of the last fiscal year to this first quarter of the current fiscal year. You can see that across the board the numbers are up. From the net sales, you can see that there's a 33.7 billion yen difference, which equates to about $300 million that they made more. Also, if you look at the operating income, you can see that there's like a 17.4 billion yen difference, which the operating income is the money they make after costs. And I believe when it comes to operating income margin, that's the percentage of money they're making versus cost. If I'm not mistaken, I'm super new to this stuff, I'm kind of researching as I go. But either way, they're making more money this quarter than last quarter. By the way, across the board, from net sales to operating income margin, they made significantly more money at the first quarter of this fiscal year compared to the final quarter of last fiscal year, which isn't really surprising. There wasn't anything major that Square Enix came out with at the beginning of this year, January to March. Obviously, we had Remake launch in April, so obviously they were going to make a lot more money. It's not really a surprise. And taking a look at this graph right here, they do a comparison of this first quarter versus the entire last fiscal year, and you can see that they made quite a bit of money. They made almost as much as the entire fiscal year. If you add up all the percentages right there from quarter 1 through 4, it equals 41.8 billions of yen versus the 34.1 from just this first quarter alone. So in this entire fiscal year, they're probably going to make more money as a whole. And if you actually look below where it says digital entertainment and HD games, they actually credit Remake for being a big part of this. They say, net sales operating income up sharply year over year owing to higher digital sales of Final Fantasy VII Remake, licensing income, etc. I think a big part of that is because there was a lot more digital sales of a Remake because of COVID-19 and all that shit, obviously, and they made significantly less physical copies of the game because people could not really go out and buy it. And because there's less physical versions of the game to be made, it made their costs go down significantly, so they had a bigger profit because it doesn't really cost anything to sell a digital version of the game. It's just data you download offline. But another big takeaway from this exact same graph is at the bottom, it shows major titles in fiscal year 2021 quarter 3. So that's at the end of this year, October, November, December. They have Remake in there, which I found a bit interesting because obviously by the time October, November, December rolls around, this game's going to be quite old, but they still claim that it'll be a major title for that quarter. Now, Remake being a major title for the holiday season could be for a few reasons, but the most obvious and most likely reason would be the game just being on sale then. I think that's the most obvious and probably makes the most sense, but if we want to put on the old tinfoil hat, a little bit of speculation, there could be the potential elusive DLC or expansion pack that a lot of us are hoping for. There's absolutely zero evidence, as far as I'm aware, of this ever happening, but a lot of us are hoping for that. We're hoping they would give us some sort of an expansion or DLC, some more stuff to play for Remake, to kind of hold us over until Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 comes out. Now, as for what a DLC for the game or an expansion could be, that's kind of a topic for another video, but a lot of us have speculated maybe getting the Calm flashback, like that could be its own little DLC. It doesn't necessarily need to be a part of the next game. Maybe exploring around Midgar a bit, like the outskirts, the wasteland of Midgar and stuff, or maybe being able to go back into Midgar and explore areas that we didn't get to explore in the original game. The first game, anyway. But anyways, dudes, that's pretty much the video. To kind of wrap it all up here at the end, they made a shit ton of money this first quarter. Like, a lot. They made almost as much as they made their entire last year. And a big part of that was due to the digital sales of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which, as we know, as of right now, almost 4 months later, they sold about 5 million copies. If we were to do that, like, kind of basic math, like, just do 5 million copies at $60 a piece, which is kind of doing an average, that'd be like $300 million they made off of just Remake alone. That's not accounting for all their other games. They have a couple of MMOs, they have a ton of mobile games, stuff like that. Like, they've made quite a bit of money. And why this is important for us to talk about as consumers is Remake making money is good. They can be confident in their product. If it were to fail financially, they might cut corners on part 2. They could end it all, right? Like if, say, the first game or two didn't make a lot of money, they might not finish out the Remake project, right? We may never get the full story, which would suck. But the fact that the game is making a lot of money is good. By the way, we should wrap it up. Leave your thoughts and more in the comment section below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. We'll get more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter at @dashingdavid. I'm a Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.